Yeah, let's dive in. And I always begin with this first question, and it's the COVID question. 6 years ago, our lives were changing. How did you get through that era, and how did it influence the way that you work and live today?
Well, I at the time when COVID hit, we were living in Colorado, in the mountains of Colorado, actually. So we were out where it was somewhat remote already. Loved being there. And so I would say because I was also working from home, COVID didn't have a huge impact on us personally. So we certainly made the appropriate shifts, did some of the things that we all did, go out and clean all of our vegetables and all of our groceries when we had to go shopping. We soon learned that was not necessary. But we made some adjustments there, but it made me recognize, I think, as this was happening, what others were experiencing that we had basically avoided because of where we lived. And it shaped a recognition of the value of having an understanding of the importance of where we're living and why we are there. So, those, for example, living in New York City in the high rise that were pretty much locked in, I thought, okay, that's not me. They're there for a reason. The key is being where it's important for us to live where we feel like it's home and then dealing with what's important in that location. But honestly, I feel like we were spared from where we were to experience what many others did.
I've heard a lot of stories of people being in the mountains, and that seems to be a pretty idyllic place during that time period because you could
Yeah.
roam, you could see things. Where exactly were you in Colorado?
We were about 30 miles west of Colorado Springs, up on the other side of Pikes Peak. And so when we wanted to get out of the house, we would just go out and go hiking and do other things like that. So
Wow.
we were blessed, to be
Yeah,
honest.
that's beautiful up there. In fact, um, I got married in 2019 and we were originally going to go to New Orleans and a hurricane was brewing. So we rerouted and went to Manitou Springs and it's become a special place. And that whole area over there, I mean, yeah, that would be the place to be during a pandemic for sure.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
So
yeah, that's
a
great.
blessing to be there. Yes.
Absolutely. So let's get into your work. You know, you're doing coaching, you're an author. There's so many things that go into what you're doing. But if you were in front of 13-year-olds at career day and one of the kids wanted you to synthesize what you do for a living, how do you explain your career?
What a great question. I think it's a good way to look at it. I would say it's important for someone that's thinking about their future. Consider what's going to give you some sense of purpose with what you're doing. A lot of times at that age, I know this was me at that age, I was looking for a way to have something I could do that I knew I was good at and could make a lot of money. That was my purpose, making a lot of money. After I finished college and got out there, I realized, that's not really sustaining for a long time to just make money. There's got to be something more that we feel like we're making some impact in some way that's positive, that makes a difference. So at 13, it may be hard for someone to think about their life purpose or what maybe how they can get engaged, but to begin to at least explore the importance of considering that as they're thinking about their future.
So what were the early examples of of leadership and of business and of making money and meaning and purpose? What did you see growing up that became a part of your pursuit, your dream, and what you've evolved to at this point?
Well, I would say I was attracted to people that were in business, that were in leadership positions. Was blessed to be in a household where my parents were good friends with many others that were in these positions. I could see what they were doing with their lives, and but also that they were doing it with integrity. And that was important because I learned that from my dad as well. But the idea to me to build something to be successful and see looking out the tangible benefits of what I had created was what was driving me. And so I think that's what got me going into my career early on. But then I began to realize that's not necessarily a good reason for me to want to get up and go to work every morning, just to try to build more and create more just for the sake of doing it. What is it accomplishing that really makes someone's lives better? That began to be a driver for me, and I realized I have to go figure out what that means for me and how I can do that myself.
So who's been that inspirational force, that heroic force that's allowed you to navigate through your career and find that purpose?
Well, I think certainly I began to recognize people. Obviously, we can look at people that are in church or in ministry, and they had a sense of their calling and their purpose in life, and they were out there wanting to do something that was meaningful. And I realized, okay, I'm not called into the ministry or to go to the mission field or anything like that. So I feel called to the business world. And maybe that's where God has me, is the way I was looking at it. But how can I do that with some way that would make a difference? So when I saw leaders that in their business were having a positive impact in the lives of their employees, they were doing things that seemed to help the community in some way, and they built that into how they lived their life as a business owner or business leader. Those kinds of people are the ones that really began to give me the inspiration to realize I can be in the business world, have some success, and still be making a difference on that platform.
So the one thing about kind of the coming of age of us is that someone sees that ability in you to shine, to make a change, to do good things. Who was that for you? Who was that person that believed in you, that allowed you to have that confidence to become who you are?
Good question. To be honest, Joe, I would say that probably I didn't have a lot of that in my life. And I would see many situations and people where I was around and who I was with that they weren't necessarily bad people or people that had some improper motive in some way, but they really weren't very engaging to help encourage me in my mentorship. And so it made me realize I wanted to be able to do something like that for others myself. If I'm in that situation where I'm going to be in a leadership role, I want to be able to do that for others because it was missing in my experience. Just happened to be the way it worked out. And so that gave me that motivation because I missed that and I knew I needed it.
So, is there an example of someone that's alive today that walks that line between faith and business and leadership, and they do it really well that you would like to meet and talk to that might help you on your journey?
Well, what a great question. There are a number of people that I have seen and been observing. Some I think for me would be the Green family that founded Hobby Lobby. David Green, I followed him for years and heard him speak occasionally and just read some of his books. But the fact that he had a sense of what he was doing in the business world, built quite a sizable business, but also did it with some intentionality in a way that was honoring of his employees. And the other one would be the leadership of Chick-fil-A, the Cathy family, Truett Cathy, and then some of the later generations that did this as well. Those are some that most everybody probably recognizes, and I would say those are two. But I've also learned through something called faith-driven entrepreneurs. There are a number of business people that are letting their faith drive how they live out their faith in the business world. And I see so many examples of how they're doing it in ways that are truly phenomenal. And so when I go see and hear about those stories, I would love to have more time to talk to them as well.
You know, when we're on this quest of refining our faith and finding spirituality, and there's different ways of doing it between Christianity, the Muslim, the Buddhist, the Hindus. I mean, there's all these different deities that exist, and we get early on we get talked to and we get kind of indoctrinated, so to speak, from our families, and it's just a part of what we've learned. And then we go on our own. We figure out our own independence and freedom, and we want to dig in more. But
Yeah.
along that way, there are examples of us, undeniable examples that God exists. What was the first time that you felt on your own without someone telling you that you felt that presence? You felt like there was definitely a divine creator that was a part of this entire design of what we're doing.
Good question. And I would say I did grow up in the church. So our family did go to church and we had that sense of the presence of God. I'm going to date myself now, but would you believe growing up in the South, we actually had in school, our teachers in elementary school back in the 60s would share Bible stories. So it was all part of the culture.
Yeah.
But that being the foundation, the key was when I recognized, I would say probably in my 20s, that a relationship with Jesus for me and that connection, and that he had something he wanted to share with me personally, not just for me to go do something out there that perhaps he would bless in some way, but to have a connection with me. That was probably in my late 20s when I had that time of experience to recognize he is real and he wants to guide me as to how I live my life in a way that's going to be a blessing to me and bring abundance for me. Not just not do things, but what can I do that honors him, but also gives me a sense of purpose and fulfillment.
I'm a Gen Xer. I'm a child of the 80s, so I even think about the 80s, about the things that were going on that would never happen today. And I think about what you're saying in the 60s, and I think about society sometimes, like how have we stayed together with things that happen, chaos that surrounds us sometimes. What is that glue? And it's if we didn't have spirituality, if we didn't have the tenets of the religion and the faith, and that's the glue. I mean, that's undeniably, no matter where you come from in your faith, that has been the glue that's held us together. So when I hear stories of teachers doing that, that's a natural outgrowth of them and the community, and what has held us together, what's bonded us together.
Yeah, yeah. It's that sense that I feel like we all need at some level, whether we recognize it or not, that we need some outside reference of how do I know what's right and what's wrong? How do I know what I should be doing and what I shouldn't be doing?
Yeah.
Not just because somebody tells me it's wrong, but it's this inner sense that I just know without a doubt this is the way and this is not the way.
So as an author, what books were you reading early on? Who were authors? What were storylines that were captivating you?
Well, interestingly, that I would say over the years, I would read a lot by people that were themselves have a good sense of what they knew they wanted to be doing in life and that it was important to them. They felt in some way called. They didn't use those words necessarily, but when you would read their stories and hear about their lives, they knew why they were here on earth and why they were doing what they were doing. And that really got my attention. It wasn't until later I looked back and realized that this is part of what drew me to that and what it made me want to have this ability to help others find that for themselves.
So if you had a dream tonight and you ran into the 18-year-old version of you and you walked into a room and you hit play on a film projector and your life in 60 seconds, a highlight of your life came up there on the wall, would you believe your life turned out this way?
No way. I was like, are you kidding me? Wow. Not what I expected at that age, for sure.
Would you give any advice to that young version of you?
I would say yes, just looking back at the ability to be able to do that, I think it would be okay. Pay attention to what really matters. Relationships need to be the most important thing. First of all, my relationship with God, but then secondly, my relationship with my wife, with my kids, with my family, with those that are important to me. Don't sacrifice those for the sake of something else. And recognize too that if we just are patient and look for ways that we can work with how God has wired us, we can begin to have impact without being stressful because we're working out of who we are, not who we think we should be or want to be, that doesn't reflect who we actually are.
So I try not to have old guy thoughts when I think about the world and how it's changed. I'm 53, and sometimes you get pigeonholed into that. Oh, well, I remember when I grew up and things are crazy now. But I think things are genuinely crazy in a way right now that I don't think any of us imagine. So, my question to you, of someone exuding positivity that's helping people find not only their roots in business and in faith, but overall, how what is the optimism for you every day? What is that strength? What is that vision that allows you to be positive and to make a change in people's lives?
Well, I think, Joe, you bring up a good point. I think sometimes we don't want to pretend real situations, real problems don't exist. I think that's a mistake too. There are lots of things out there that are serious that we need to take seriously and pay attention to. The key is, I think sometimes it's hard to know, okay, some of these things are so big. What can I do? I mean, there's really not much difference I can make, so why should I even be thinking about it? And so I think sometimes we have to recognize that perhaps our contribution to make things better may, in the grand scheme of things, not be that big of a deal. But if each of us are able to do something that makes a difference, where we happen to have a place of influence, a place of where we're already involved, and just be content with that, I think then we all collectively can have some positive impact if we look at it that way. But the other thing, Joe, too, is that I'm a goal setter by nature. And so I can say, well, I'd love to do this and see these results. And I've had that experience in my business career. The other thing, Joe, I had to recognize is that doing what makes a difference and has impact is what I should be thinking about, but let go of the results. Let God control the results and just be there to make an impact and then trust whatever happens as a result. Because we can't necessarily change everything ourselves. It's God that's going to ultimately do it, is the way I see it.
I remember some years back, a good friend of mine, just on a whim, he was talking about going to see his in-laws and how stressful it was sometimes. And he got to a point where he had no expectations when he walked in. And I think that's the problem sometimes is that us as humans have this expectation of how anything's going to be or turn out. And I think I always feel like traveling is a little bit like the afterlife. I always go in with the best intentions and I just have this good feeling that things are going to happen. There's going to be magic. There's going to be things that you can't foretell. You just got to go in with a blank slate almost.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. And boy, do I have my expectations. And honestly, I feel like I probably set them too high many times.
Yeah.
So, boy, what a good way to put it. I think that's well said. The key is too, I think, is that not have too high expectations and then set ourselves up for disappointment. But in addition, going in looking for and expecting surprises that we realize are good. We didn't expect them, we didn't anticipate them, and then they occur. And then that becomes a wow. I was like, I didn't see that coming, but boy, was that good.
Yeah.
And just realize those things are around us if we pay attention to them.
For sure. So let's say you walk into a room of everybody that's known you as the businessman throughout your life, and you go to a podium and you could tell them a fun story about your life. Maybe the first concert you went to, a sporting event that was seminal, a wonderful place you traveled to, just something that would be fun, that would humanize you a little bit to that room that has known you as a businessman. What would be a fun story you would tell that room?
Well, I would have to say, thinking about travel for a moment, that's an easy one for me just to say we had a chance, my wife and I, talking about COVID, coming out of COVID. This was in 2021 in June when we were still living in Colorado. My wife and I had the opportunity to do a 3-day rafting trip in the Grand Canyon.
Wow.
So we did that. We had to get our COVID shots so we would be able to be there and all of that. And everybody was doing that, of course. But to have that experience of being where someone else guided the rafts, we were not doing that. Somebody else provided for us with the food and dictated where we stopped and all of those things. So we were just there along for the ride. And for me, that likes to be in control of things, that was so different. But what a blessing it was just to enjoy somebody else's energy and creativity and scheduling and planning and executing it well and just experiencing that when somebody else did that in such a great manner.
It's funny you bring that up because as a kid from the Midwest, not ever seeing the mountains or the ocean or real grandiose landscapes, I remember the first time I saw the Grand Canyon, I was like, there is no possible way that there's not a God or some benign being that made this what I'm looking at. And the fun thing about that, when I looked at it, is it's the Colorado River and you can see it going through, and I could just see little specks of things moving down there. And I was like, I bet they're having a good time. And that's where you were. You were down there. And I was
Yeah.
probably looking down and seeing that happen. That's amazing. So were the rapids hardcore or were they how were the rapids?
Well, where we were on the lower part of the river. The upper part was where there were heavier rapids. Our part, it was less intense. But we'd have places where we'd get out there and I'd sit on the raft was big enough to hold like 15 of us.
Yeah.
I'd get up there and sit on the very front and get the bounce and the water coming up like this and just being soaked with it. I mean, it was so much fun.
Yeah, that's
So
great.
they were just enough to enjoy it, not enough to think, oh my gosh, am I going to survive?
Yeah, right. You don't want that. That's not vacation. So, of everything that you've done, accomplished, and evolved to at this point in your life, what are you ultimately the happiest about, the proudest of?
I would say it's the ability to be able to be used by God to have an impact on somebody else's life so that they can see for themselves how God is using them to impact other people in some form or fashion. It really doesn't matter what it is, but it's something that is unique to what they feel is important to them, that is sort of this hole that God has placed there, that they can go do something about it to make a difference in some way. And me just to help them do that and see the result of them getting involved and seeing what's happening through their lives. That to me is probably the biggest satisfaction at this point. With my wife, my kids, those I coach, anybody else. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So let's dig just a little bit further. Everyone has a perception of you: family, friends, clients, readers, everyone that knows you in different capacities, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Uh, well, boy, it's one of those things where I think sometimes I can underestimate myself, as we all probably do. At this point in life, I don't think I believe that I can accomplish the things that I once thought I could. So it's not always seen for myself how I can have an impact just by being there, being present, and being me as a result of that. So I think certainly what I see is somebody that can be used in some fashion as God wants to use me, and then just being content with what that may be. It may be minimal, it may be small, but being there and being that person just available and present, showing up. Those are the things I think that is most important I'm recognizing now and letting go of all these grandiose plans at one point I had.
So you've secured everything. Being used by God is the book, that's the website. If there's anything else that people want to tap into, where's the best place? How can they do that?
I would say one of the things to keep in mind, and this is something I'm finding as I've been talking to others after writing the book and getting their response. Everybody right now, whoever they are, wherever they have several platforms where they are currently engaged in some fashion. A platform is where we have a presence and where we have influence. I would call even our family, if we're married, our spouse, where we might be working is an easy one, but where we go to church, it might be a community group we're a part of, whatever that is a place where we're currently involved and engaged. Do we have clarity about our purpose there? And how can we be more intentional without trying to get grandiose about all these wonderful goals, but just to be more intentional to be used there in some fashion, whatever that is? But stop and identify where you are now and how can you be more engaged and be more impactful there, just by doing even some minimal things.
So I will put all of these links in the show notes. What a wonderful message. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Well, I enjoyed our discussion. Thank you for the questions. They were great questions.
It's fun. You're awesome.